Welcome back to The Truth with Trinity, and I am your host, Trinity. And if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, I'd like to send you a warm welcome. Here I talk about issues that happen within the Black community, hopefully for some resolution or at least some food for thought to go about your daily way. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into this episode's topic, which is the method of colonization. How did whites conquer the earth? Okay, I wanted to start off by saying that this is not a hate filled message. White people in America and all over the world can talk about black people being slaves, the history of black people, the stereotypes, the criminal records of black people, and they can still be accused of not hating black people. And, with our children, especially if there's any youth listening, it's very important that they're not just getting down watered down versions of what is just positive or even made up historical myths about someone else's race. And all we're told, or all our children are told in school, is that they just come from slavery, without it just really being opened up on both sides with black and white people. The reality of issues that we have in this country. Okay, because the reality is that you know in America we have some white people who can't get past the fact of seeing black people as no more than a Negro, and we have black people, some black people, that they love being that Negro. Okay, so in order for America to really have any positive change, they would have to come to grips with change on both sides of the spectrum. So let me get back to my topic at hand, which is the method of colonization. How did whites conquer the earth? Because a lot of times, when there's a race topic that comes up, a lot of white people, they will gaslight and say that your own people sold you into slavery, but that is just a surface. That's just a surface primer of what really actually happened. So I wanted to go into the history of Caucasians to start off with. Okay, so this is about approximately 50,000 years ago. Okay, the origins of Caucasians come from a mountain in Europe called the Caucasus Mountain. Okay, they were very violent. Okay, so Caucasians, at that time were very uncivilized. It's very ironic that they, talk about, black people being so uncivilized now. But, when they were found on the mountain, they were very violent toward each other, talking about black on black crime. But, there was no one around on that mountain but Caucasian people, and they were very violent towards one another. They were very uncivilized and had no intelligible language. So they were not speaking English or any type of language. Okay? They resided in caves, had no cooking ability, basically eating raw meat, okay? And they were having sex with animals and all sorts of barbaric things, okay? And when you see or hear of the term Neanderthal or cavemen, these terms refer to their origins, Caucasians' origins, okay? But in 2021, okay, so currently, when you look at whites across the world, they have managed to forcibly include themselves into every crevice of the earth, so every country practically. Okay, um, a being who once walked around on all fours is now clean and slick shaven and is now considered the ruler of the world. But how did this come to be? Okay, in America, whites are freely able to teach and give their interpretation, called history, on everyone else's culture, but no one is hardly allowed to speak on their culture unless it is something that sounds pleasing to their ears. So it's something positive, but no one else is allowed to talk about their culture, but they're allowed to point and give terms and call people what colors they want people to be. And if you're black, blue, green, they'll call you that, but you can't really call them much. They can tell you about your own race. They're the master at telling everybody else about their culture. But you can't tell them about their culture without being considered a liar. Okay? But in order for there to be true change, okay, like I said, a lot of reality and a lot of things need to come to the surface. And like I said once before, white America loves the ideal that black people are Negroes, and most black people love being the Negro. And that's the problem that we have in this country. And I want to go over some methods of colonization. Okay, so these are methods that they didn't just use on black people or Native Americans. This is, their method of conquering other people's territories. Okay, so let me start with number one. They studied the group of people they wished to conquer. So before they ever set sail to even step foot in someone else's land, they studied them. Okay, who they were and things of that nature. Okay. Number two, they pretended to be lost and that they were grateful for friendships in foreign lands. Okay, so an example is, with the Native Americans, and they also did that, with the Africans and several other different continents. They pretended to be lost somewhere, shipwrecked, and they pretended to be grateful. Okay, like henceforth Thanksgiving. They claim that it's about pilgrims landing over and celebrating with Native Americans, but Native Americans have a totally different story. They'll tell you about the scalping, the killing, the murdering, and the taking over of their land. So it's not, befriending anyone, but they pretended, so when they got upon shore, they pretended as if they were lost. Okay. Number three, they found a few people within that group to befriend to convince others in their tribe to trust them as foreigners. So, of course, being foreigners, them not having any melanin in other parts of the globe, people, of course, and just being a different, culture of people, a lot of the tribes were apprehensive, but they always found a few people within that tribe that would befriend them and teach them the language, okay, so that they could move about in the land that they were in and get them to show them where the gold was or any type of treasures that they had. And the people from that tribe would also convince the chieftains or, the leaders that, hey, these are cool people, Caucasians are cool people. They're friends with me. But little did they know they were only doing that, using them to infiltrate. Okay. And even when, you hear a lot of Caucasians say, hey, we're your own people sold you, that's just half of the truth, that intentionally, found some people that were of that tribe, whether they were Native Americans. Like I said, this method has been used with several different other races other than just blacks and Native Americans, finding someone within that tribe and befriending them only to infiltrate. Okay. Um, like I said, they convinced insiders to teach them the language. So wherever they were at, of course, you can't move about in a land if you don't know the language. Okay, so they, like I said, they befriended people and then, got them to teach the Caucasians the language. Okay, number five, they found out who was an enemy within those tribes. Okay, because, even back in the day, and it's human nature, not everyone's going to get along. Okay, so even people that had that were a part of the same tribe, of course not everybody of that tribe got along. And what Caucasians did was they found whoever wasn't cool with one another, and found out who wasn't, and so they were able to use those enemies against the other part of the tribes. Okay, and then before they knew it, all the people of that whole tribe was under siege. So I'll repeat that again. A lot of times Caucasians would, back in those days, pilgrims, settlers, whatever you want to call them, they would find whoever wasn't friends within those tribes, and they would befriend the other people of those tribes and get them to turn against them. But before they all knew it, they were all under siege. Okay, it's the kind of like that divide and conquer method. So like I said, then they divided. Okay, and then number seven, they took more land than what was legally agreed upon. You know, you hear about the Louisiana Purchase with the Native Americans, and because, you know, white people, a lot of Caucasians, their intentions coming from Great Britain, you know, under the oppression of British rule, they never had plans to come back. You know, so they considered, you know, the Americas, for example, a new world. Okay, and then the pirates, they went to other parts of the planet, country, not yeah, planet and country, and the world, you know, looking for different things that they didn't have over in Britain. You know, different resources, golds, rubies, jewels, and things of that nature. And so um, they never had any intention of coming back. So when they came over here, they made it seem like they were lost, and then they pretended as if they liked it so well that they just were looking for somewhere to settle. And by the Native Americans and, you know, other melanated people being so kind, um, they gave them a part of the land and had an agreement. And one of the agreements that are well known is the Louisiana Purchase, about this is the part of land that we're going to allow you to settle on. Okay, so that's what I mean by they took more land that was what was legally agreed upon. So they broke those treaties as soon as they got a certain amount of Europeans over here. They said, "Hey, this is all of our land, and we're going to move you to a small part of your own land in America, and we're going to take way more than what is in this legal treaty." Um, Pretty much. Number 8, they had artillery that no tribe could defend itself from. Okay, so when you talk about, you know, a lot of tribes during that time, you know, having arrows, spears, and shields, you know, that's one of the best inventions I guess they could have came up with, you know, which really enabled them to conquer as well as they did, was having artillery such as gunpowder, um, and all sorts of, you know, certain, you know, handheld, you know, guns or whatever, or whatever they had, you know, the other tribes definitely didn't have. So, of course, you know, a spear is not going to be any defense against gunpowder or fire. So, number 9, they had diseases no shaman could heal, like syphilis and herpes and things of that nature. And I think that's what is so ironic to hear, you know, in today's medical field, them talk about, you know, so many other minorities, quote unquote minorities, and black people, Hispanics, having, you know, a high percentage of this disease and that disease, when they don't talk about their diseases that they're more prone to, and the diseases that they had brought over from their country. Like I said, like syphilis. You know, these are diseases that you know, blacks and Native Americans had never heard of before. So they did have certain illnesses, but their shamans could not, you know, heal it because they had never seen it, and it wiped out thousands and millions of their people by their, you know, their quote unquote settlers raping their women and spreading it in blankets. And when you hear the term blankets, it's not an actual blanket. It's just spreading it in large groups of numbers of people and killing them. Okay, just spreading it like wildfire. The diseases that were inflicted upon the tribes. Number 10, they forced others to give up their language, artifacts, and culture while they were allowed to keep their own. So this is a big part of colonization, and even to this day, you know, when they go through other people's lands and they force them to give up their name, and, you know, to say that their way is better, you know, and I think that is very troublesome, you know, for Caucasians to go throughout other people's lands and telling other people how they should live and that their way is better, a better way to live just because they think so. So, you know, they forced a lot of people to give up their language, okay, to give up their names, and, you know, to create European names for them. And I'll discuss in another episode, but, you know, that's one thing that differentiates black slavery from among other slave people that were enslaved, because people love to mention Jewish people and they love to mention how other, races of people were enslaved. But I can't think of, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of another race of people that were enslaved to the point where they don't even know their own language. They have no trace of their ancestors' language, culture, what part they're either even from. I mean, at least with Native Americans, at least they know if they Choctaw or not. At least they can do a rain dance still, and they, they have a feather left or something. Black people, we don't have any type of culture or language left from where we come from. And I challenge those that say that that's irrelevant, because you'll hear a lot of Caucasians say that that's irrelevant. But that couldn't be furthest from the truth, because they celebrate their kings and fake queens so much. King Henry, Queen Elizabeth, King Richard the third, King Edward. So all these kings and German, Oktoberfest and, St. Patrick's Day, the list could go on about their cultures. So, for it not to be important, it's definitely important for them to celebrate their culture. So, other people definitely feel like it's, important for them to celebrate their culture as well. Number 11, they exploited a tribe's culture by taking the goods and customs and claiming that they either discovered it or that they invented them. Okay, so um, a lot of customs and goods, like I said, like gold, rubies, and jewels. Like, for example, when you look at Queen Elizabeth I, and when you look back on the last few thousand years in England, beforehand they didn't have any jewels in their crowns. They had tin and whatever type of metal that they made for their crowns, but they leave out the part where they went over to Africa and different parts of the globe that were not their own, and they robbed and killed others for those jewels and placed them in those crowns from melanated people. um, and a lot of customs and stuff, they'll exploit it, like a lot of tapestry and things in agriculture that comes from other people of melanin, and they'll say that they invented it, that this was theirs, and then they'll tell that culture that they're nothing, because everything that their people originally designed, they took it, Caucasians took it, and then they're telling the children of those cultures that they are nothing but slaves, basically. Number 12, if you were not ready to acknowledge them as superior and you or the culture as inferior, you would die. Okay, so this is another colonization method. And so many people did die of other cultures. They came in and said, hey, if you're not willing to bow down to me as a Caucasian, if you don't see me as superior and you as inferior, even in your own land, if you don't give up your language, and you have to worship my language, and you have to worship me, and European and Anglo-Saxon as superior, then you have to die. And it's kind of like that today in a way. Number 13, they even kidnapped tribal children and tortured them into speaking English. Okay, so it happened with African children. It definitely happened with Native American children. Even after they were placed upon reservations, Caucasians definitely did on those frontiers. Especially back in the 1700s and 1800s, they kidnapped a lot of Native American children, and tortured them and made them Europeanized. So dressed, made them give up their Native American attire, and made them give up, would make it to where they couldn't speak their own language by torture, and just brainwashing them basically. So this is like a brainwashing camp. So this is another way, another method that they colonized certain races of people. Number 14, using methods to burn, damage, and destroy others' historical monuments. And I find this deep. Even when you talk about the 1960s, when, blacks had perhaps attempted to go to school, attempted to desegregate certain areas. When Caucasians didn't like that, they would burn a house that maybe a black person lived in. When you talk about um, the Mississippi burnings, when you talk about Rosewood, when you talk about Black Wall Street, anytime a black person tried to be successful or even live above what certain Caucasians felt like black people should live, they would riot, they would burn, they would destroy. Okay, and that's why I find it very ironic, to hear so many white Americans talking about the riots. I think the only reason why they care so much is because it's their property. A lot of it that is being destroyed, even though it is owned by them in predominantly black neighborhoods, because the pot is calling the kettle black, because when it came time for the Klansmen, the Ku Klux Klan, the white nationalists, to burn and destroy areas and burn actual humans and burn buildings and schools and churches, no one's saying anything about that. No one's calling them animals, and no one's calling them criminals. Okay, so that's definitely a double standard. Number 15. Okay, excavating historical grave sites. Okay, the famous grave sites that are always excavated, especially by the French tourists and whatnot, was the Egyptian grave sites. Okay, and falsifying the information of what was found. Okay, so they're finding black artifacts over there in Egypt. A lot of Caucasians are quick to say, go back to Africa. Africa's where you're from. But if Africa's where black people are from, then how could the Egyptians be anything other than black people? Okay, this is a colonization method. They know the great people that black people's lineage come from, and that they are Egyptians and that they are black, and all sorts of other cultures. We don't just come from Africa. By us being the original man and woman on the earth, we were in several parts and continents of the earth. But talking about Egypt, for example, there was such a great civilization of people, and anything that has anything to do with anything great, they don't want our children to know about it. Okay, so they're going to say they're not black. They're not black because they're not great. Now, if it's something criminal, now if it's something bad or horrible, oh yeah, it's black people. But if it's something that has to do with our great heritage, no, they couldn't have been black. So that's a colonization tactic that they've used with other races of people as well. Taking gold, rubies, diamonds, and many other goods from royal grave sites. Okay, and I think that's interesting, because you don't see other races of people digging up their ancestors in England and whatnot, but they are have been very disrespectful to dig up other races of people's not websites, excuse me, but grave sites. I find that pretty troubling. Number 16, taking on other cultures as their own. Okay, so Caucasians, if you're listening, you have a bad habit about that, and telling people that the true culture belongs to others. They were nothing. Well, telling other people that they were nothing but slaves. So let me repeat that. Caucasians have a bad, history of taking on other people's cultures as their own, and telling the people that the true culture belongs to that they were nothing but slaves. Okay, and they do it with black people a lot. Okay, a lot of our culture, when you talk about the Hebrew Israelites, when you talk about the true children of Israel, when you talk about the true kings and queens of Egypt and Africa, when you talk about the Aboriginal man, they're quick to pay a Caucasian actor or actress to portray the people who are us, okay, our ancestors, and tell us we're nothing but slaves. And that's why it's important, for if there's any youthful black people listening, brothers and sisters, or if there's any parents listening, that when you send your children to school, I've always, teach my smaller children that, you give them the right answer for the grades that they are seeking. Okay, so whatever they're saying, Christopher Columbus discovered the ocean blue, you get that to get that straight A. But it's very important as black parents that when our children come home, that we give them the pride that they need, because they're not going to find it in European ran schools. Okay, because what they do is they teach a little bit about Martin Luther King. They teach the same thing every year from K to 12. Martin Luther King marched on Washington. They'll put a little bit in about Madam C.J. Walker or Rosa Parks, which is great, but that's all they'll do, and then they'll fill it back up with the slave talk. So this is a colonization tactic, because it teaches our children that this is where they come from. So you hear about the founding fathers, George Washington and Johnny Appleseed, and you'll hear about all the great, soldiers, European soldiers. But when it comes to black history, um, all you'll see is them picking cotton or slavery, and when you really think about it, they can't really teach, our true history, because it would be conflicting to the story that they're telling about their true history. So, and I think that's unfair, that black children have to sit up there and listen to European history, because their European children aren't going to sit up there and listen to black history all day. As we see, there's voters, or there's certain bills being passed not to have race relation classes in certain states, because they don't want their children to hear about anything that's other than European. And I think, until we get our own schools to be able to teach our own black children to have pride, because that's what history does. It teaches pride, and they know what it does because they teach their Caucasian children their history, or what they perceive as history. So for ours not to be important, that couldn't be furthest from the truth. So let me keep going. And well, one other thing I'd like to add too. That's why I think I don't know if it's even possible for European teachers to teach Black history successfully. Very few can do it without embellishing and without diminishing certain facts about the legacy of Black people. Number 17, let me keep going. Silencing any group or person that seeks to openly discuss their true history or Caucasians' true origins by pain upon death. So, as we've seen with different leaders and different people, anytime they try to speak out, about the true history of Black people or anything like that, they always end up dead somehow. Um, like I said, upon pain of death, because this keeps the supremacy going and the lie going. Because if the truth is being told about Black people, then it sheds light upon European lies. And this is not to say that I'm hating on any race of people, but I am a firm believer that as Black people, there's some things that we do that we can escape a victim mentality, because no one's going to solve our issues for us but ourselves. But Europeans in this country, their hands aren't exactly clean from dirt either. So we're not going to be victims as Black people, but we do have a group of Caucasians. So this is not all Caucasians, but they do seek to enforce this belief that all Black people are inferior without shedding light upon their own inconsistencies and inadequacies. The last part I'd like to say is about colonization is number 18, gaslighting other tribes into submission by diminishing the effects of their colonization methods. Okay, so they do it even to this day. They gaslight other tribes, like, hey, what I did wasn't bad. It wasn't all that bad. It was whatever. It was a long time ago. Your people didn't experience it. And another thing I wanted to add in there too is I find it very troubling when Caucasians mention about how lazy Black people were, when they were extremely lazy. They wouldn't even breastfeed. White women wouldn't even breastfeed their own children. They had Black women called mammies breastfeeding their own children, and talking about how lazy Black people are, when all white women and men did for hundreds of years was sit on their porches and watch Black people work and make them rich. and they got so rich that their children's children's children got rich even up into 2021. And now all Europeans are saying that none of their people were slaveholders. So they're saying that, oh no, none of our people are slaveholders, none of our ancestors are. Well, where did all the old money go? And how come you all are just so openly rich? Like, and they'll say, well, it's because we work so hard. Well, that's false. White people in this country have only been working pretty damn hard, excuse my French, for only about what, 145 years maybe, if that. They haven't been working that hard for that long. Um, to continue, so they, like I said, they gaslight other tribes into submission by diminishing the effects of their colonization methods or forcing others to show them affection. Okay, yet if the shoe was on the other foot, they would not show any respect. If what they did to other people was done to them, they wouldn't be talking about this land is your land, this land is my land, and kumbaya, and let's all love and get together and all that jazz. But as black people, I just wanted to give a little bit of that history, because you're not going to get it in school. They're definitely not going to discuss it. And it's to let black people know that we can have pride in ourselves and we don't need permission from anyone, okay, to find out and seek the knowledge about who we are so that we can become a better person and a better people every day. That pretty much wraps up this segment. It's been a pleasure talking with you all. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can at thetruthwithtrinity.com. You can also listen to my podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Anchor. And always remember, if you can't tell the truth with anyone else, you can with Trinity. Till next time, take care.